In our final question for this segment, regarding HHC code capture in the note, when an annual wellness visit is performed, this physician often adds the HCC at the end to increase the RAF score. Their auditor said that they can't do this if they don't actively manage these things. Is there a way to do this legally?
The office manager said, don't just list HCC scores in the assessment and plan when you're doing an annual wellness visit. Mm-hmm. The provider or someone wants to know, but I want to, and so how can I do this? So the coder or whoever it was is right that, you know, a list of codes, a list of diagnosis codes at the end of a note in the assessment and plan isn't really what the HCC and RAF scores are all about. Physicians do confuse those things on a pretty regular basis. You know, they're responding to requests from administration and coders and payers and everybody else to, you know, report all these codes, make sure we know how complex the patient is. Every year, you need to tell us all of the patient's problems. And so that probably sounds to them like, yep, give me a list of codes. But what's really behind that, and what's behind that whole payment system is they want you to evaluate each of those problems in the course of a year, or to tell them how many problems needed to be evaluated, addressed in the course of a year, so that they can properly kind of assemble that total fabric, if you will, of the patient. You know, how complex are they, how many, how bad, how often, all that. But just naming things and just a list of diagnosis codes, that's just a list of diagnosis codes. I mean, you could kind of copy the problem list and stick it down there too. You know, you can't typically address all of the patient's problems if they've got any complexity at all in one visit. Certainly, if the visit is an annual wellness visit and then maybe some problem management, you know, you can't do all of them. You know, now the visit's going to get pretty long. So let's see, the question is there a way to do this legally? No, it's not correct to just give them a list of diagnosis codes. If you want to lay claim to the HCC assessment portion of a problem, you know, that I looked at this year, the trick there really is to assign it a status. It's the same way that the E&M codes, the decision-making works with the new medical decision-making guidelines that the AMA just came out with. There's a little bit of discussion about, you know, what constitutes a problem, what constitutes whether a problem counts today. And it really hinges on some kind of evidence that the physician evaluated or assessed it. And how do we know that? It's characterized as, you know, stable, well-controlled, improving, you know, continue with, you know, nephrology, you know, whatever it is. That last one might not count because if you're not managing it. But for HCC purposes, you know, that code is now in there and we know what's going on. It's being managed by nephrology. So I would say to try to straddle the fence a little bit, if you are really interested in reporting the HCC codes, and it's because you have assessed some of these problems or have something to say about them, then you can just add a little section in your assessment plan underneath the annual wellness visit portion that says, you know, conditions, you know, addressed today or conditions assessed today, and list them and give them some sort of assessment or evaluation or characterization, if you will. I see physicians write problems not addressed today, and they just give a big long list of things. If a third-party payer, if a risk payer wants to take that list and credit you with that, why then, you know, bless them. But that's not really what the, you know, program says. It's looking for the status of problems. So I would say that that's kind of no, you can't really just give a list and get credit for it. The trick there is to either you're saying something about those problems or you're not. So I hope that's a good enough answer. I would encourage, you know, physicians to get on board with this characterization or, describing problems as stable, improved, worsening, et cetera. It's always been the core of the decision-making piece. And that's now going to be not just in the front seat, it's going to be the only thing that payers are really looking at come January 21 with the change in the E&M guidelines. They're just going to be looking at decision-making. It's actually a federal rule that, for an established problem, you have to say, it's part of the documentation guidelines, whether that problem is stable, improved, worsening, et cetera. And, even to preserve levels of service, that's kind of in there too. Is it mildly exacerbated, wildly exacerbated? That might be the difference between a 4 and a 5. And so that languaging is tremendously important. And there's I would say, a pretty systemic over-reliance on computer-generated lists of codes, when what they're really looking for is, how bad is this? What is going on with this problem? That's what they really want to know. So I hope that answers it.